Another thing to talk about when discussing monopoly is the fact that monopoly is illegal. But sometimes monopoly is allowed because it makes more sense, because it reduces costs for society by having monopoly. For example, your utility companies are a monopoly. That means like Nicor, who provides your gas for furnaces and stoves, and ComEd, which is your electricity. In Indiana, it's NIPSCO, Northern Indiana Power Supply Company, and it's the water companies are monopolies. The reason is because how many different sets of pipes, how many different sets of wires do you want in the ground, do you want in the sky that people have to look at? Society generally agrees one is better, and so monopoly, when allowed, is regulated. Monopoly, when it's regulated, then it's drawn the same way that we always draw it. And I'll draw just your typical monopoly. Here's your demand curve. Remember, marginal revenue is always below quantity and price. Then we add our marginal cost, which is the supply curve, and then we put in average total cost. In this case, then, regulating monopoly, then there are two ways government would go about regulating monopoly. They would use either what's called marginal cost pricing, or they would use what's called average total cost pricing. Remember, if monopoly were trying to do what monopoly does, they would find this spot right there where MC equals MR. They would dot down, there's their quantity. They would dot up, and then this would be the price that monopoly would charge us. So what happens is with marginal cost pricing, government forces equilibrium. This is allocatively efficient. Marginal cost pricing in that instance, then right there, would dot down to here, and then over like so. And so in the blue then would be the government forced monopoly. And then in the red, you see what monopoly wishes they could do. Remember, in the red here, monopoly would have a deadweight loss. But by producing at equilibrium, the allocative efficient amount is used and the total surplus is maximized. The thing is, when government does this, then government would then give what is called a subsidy. They would give a subsidy to make up the difference between the two prices and the quantities for the revenue. We'll talk about subsidy here in a little bit, but there are two kinds of subsidies. You could either do what's called a per unit subsidy, or you would do what's called a lump sum subsidy. That comes up in regulation. The second way government might step in and intervene here is using what is called average total cost pricing. Average total cost pricing then would be over here. This point matters because when you dot down, there's the quantity, Q3, and then you dot over, there's P3. This matters because remember, where average total cost strikes demand, this is the break-even point. And at the break-even point, this would be what is referred to as normal profit. In this case, that's probably what they would do. They wouldn't go with the blue to equilibrium because the monopoly would still be profitable. They'd probably go all the way out to Q3 and force break even, meaning zero profit. But remember, the business would be able to stay in business for as long as they can, forever really, because all their costs are being covered. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is how government regulates monopoly. They will force monopoly either into what's called marginal cost pricing, which is aka equilibrium, or they'll use what's called average total cost pricing, meaning they will force break even, which is the same thing as saying force them to earn normal profit. If they were to do this, then they would probably offer a subsidy, a per unit or a lump sum subsidy to offset the fact that the monopoly is earning less. Remember, in the red here, their profit would be at their maximum. In the blue, they're going to have a smaller profit, but it's allocatively efficient because of equilibrium. That's better for consumers. In the green, there's no profit at all. It's zero profit, as a matter of fact. But then society gets more product at the lowest price possible. That's, of course, how they do utilities, like your ComEd, your electricity, your gas, that sort of thing. So that'll do for now. If you have any questions, ask me.